Hi, Professor, are you there? Can I have some hands here?
Hello.
Yeah, thank you.
Assalamu alaikum and good morning. Good afternoon.
Hi, Professor.
Firoza, assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. I hope you are audible as well.
Yes. I can hear you loud and clear. Is the class ready and we can start the...
I think so. I mean, we are missing some of the students, but I'm pretty sure they're gonna join. Someone maybe forget the flash.
That's all.
Professor Azim is a very busy man. I understand because he's from the ministry, so he might do this a lot. But I just request for your understanding. I hope you maintain the connection. I'm pretty sure if you're willing to stay in the education sector, he's someone you'd like to be in touch with. He's very knowledgeable.
Yes, Firoza, are we ready to go now?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Good afternoon and assalamu alaikum, everyone. How are you all? Good? Yes, I'm fine. But it reminds me, it takes me back 35 years ago while I was a student, a master's level student. Normally the classes in the afternoon sessions are really not a good one. And you always feel that the professor and the student, they are at a rivalry stage. You do not like because in the afternoon session, the sessions are not very welcoming. I'm sorry that we are posed in such a situation that just after the lunch, we are having this class. But we will definitely try to make it an interactive one so that we do not get bored. Do you agree to me?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, the slides are uploaded in the Google Classroom in case you have difficulties. Okay, I can check out.
Yeah. Is my slide visible to you?
Yes, Professor.
Okay, good. Though it's not a very interesting topic, this policies, but till then, we will try to keep ourselves awake through our discussion. If we can remember, in our last class, we were just introduced, we tried to understand what policy is, why it is important, and what are the factors that influence policy in our real world. And this particular session, though it's the second one, this is again the second part of understanding some of its characteristics. We even saw some of its characteristics in our last class. But today we will try to look into some of the theoretical perspective of policy. We will look into the people, the researchers who have theorized it in their own way, and from their theories we will try to understand the policy cycle issues and try to see some of the steps and stages of policy that will ultimately help us to understand better understand our education policy and its different characteristics and how we can go about it. Well, it's a kind of a recap, to be very honest, if you can just remember. In our last class, we already shared some of those. If we can just summarize it, that will ultimately take us back to the concept of the policy issue. To start with, we discussed in our last class that policies are very in a general term. This is a set of ideas or plans used by the organization or any government to guide its decision and to achieve some rational outcomes. So whenever it's both the organization and the government, they just prepare some ideas or just accumulate some plans to achieve that. And the second thing that we discussed in our last class is that policy, it serves as a framework, to be very honest, within that framework, the individuals or the entities operate to ensure consistency and alignment with overarching goals. As we said that the goal is set by the government or by the organization. So within that framework, the people who are engaged in that particular arena, either within the government or within the organization, they just operate to ensure that their consistency and in alignment with the target, they just work on it. The third idea that we discussed in that particular session yesterday, in our first session, was that it is a structured approach. Definitely, we discussed how we saw it as a structured approach, and we saw it as a problem-solving, I think, tool, or as a tool which is used as which is used to make some decisions within the framework. It is, to be very honest, considered as essential in various domains, including public administration, corporate governance, healthcare, education, as they provide to structured approach to the problem solving. And another issue that we discussed and we just came out in agreement from the literature we have seen that these ideas or these plans, this can be formal or this can be informal. In the formal framework, these are known as laws or regulations. And in case of informal, in the organization, these are known as guidelines or procedures, following which actually the organization structure themselves. And last but not the least is that the policy has to be a clear course of action that can be systematically followed to address specific issues and to achieve particular objectives. Because the essence lies with the policy is its ability to establish a clear course of action. That's another key concept or key characteristic of policy. And those clear concepts will be able to or can be systematically followed. Those clear course of action has to be followed by the people who are working within the organization or within the government to address some specific issues and also to achieve particular objective. So this is in a nutshell is the framework. This is now the framework that we have accumulated to understand the concept of the policy. And the characteristics that we have seen for the policy, just if we can just look at it, these policies gives us an overall guideline, how to work about it, how to address some particular problem. So this policy works as a guideline for us, for an organization or for the government machinery, what to do, how to do, and what to achieve. This sort of a guideline that policy gives us. It also helps us or helps identifying the boundary up to what level we will address to that. So it really shapes our thoughts, our actions, that for that particular policy, what will be our boundary. It gives us some instructions also how to deal about it. It also helps us taking decisions whenever we identify any problem, whenever we identify an agenda to be achieved. We then take a decision needs to be taken from the government that we need to take the policy so that that helps us address that particular problem. And of course, another important thing is making an activity clear and understandable. The policy has to be that if the policy is not clear and not understandable by each and every stakeholder involved in it, then definitely, as we discussed, as we closed our discussion in our last class, that there will be a messy situation. We can just can visualize a chaotic situation within that organization or within the government machinery, just to understand what to do, because many people will translate it in many different ways, and the activities will be different. And finally, another important characteristics of policy is about locating or identifying the steps or activities that are necessary to achieve the desired goal. Having said those, let's have a policy framework, and let's see how the literature sees it. And from the literature, from various point of view, we just try to make a framework for the policies, the key issues involved in it. As you can see the policy triangle shared by our Mr. Walton and Gilson, and many others also actually came up just suggesting that the key things are the context is plays a very important role. The content is one of the 4 elements. There are 4 elements that they're identified on. Those are context, content, process, and the actors. And the context, why we need this policy. The context ultimately explains us or ask us this question just to know the why do we need it and where. And content actually refers to what is the policy mainly about, what it is about, what area we need to address under that context. And the process refers to how was the policy brought forward and implemented. And finally, the most important instrument or the character in this triangle is the actors. Those actors who participate in and influence in that policy being implemented properly and policy being achieving the target. So these are the critical issues involved in policy framework, and I'm sure when you will go about for other literature, we can find out more like this sort of an explanation just to justify why these things are so critical to understand policy framework and how these will ultimately shape our understanding of education policy in practice. Having said those, I can the next thing as I was trying to discuss with you is the policy interpretation. Policy interpretation is another critical arena. I mean, when we will interpret something, we just try to encode and decode the process. These are the 2 critical arena. The figure shown here, you can see, it illustrates the complex nature of policy making and its interpretation. I'd like to request you to go back to Paul Trawler's book, Policy Making, if my memory is not betraying me. So I'm definitely, if you search it, you will get it in your scholarly, Google Scholar, and then you can definitely get it. Otherwise, I will share it with our Firoza madam so that she can share it with you. So that is really a very good and interesting book, which will ultimately show you how this policy encoding process and decoding process helps us identifying the thing. The process of encoding policy, that is actually a complex one in which policy texts are developed as a process of negotiation, compromise, and exercise of power. As a result, these policy texts are usually laden with multiple agendas. And you will be happy with, there will be not only agendas, there will be, it will be usually laden with some attitudes, values, sets of the meaning. So this is how the policy encoding does involves complex practices of interpreting. You can just see the competing interpretation interests and the intentions of policymakers. That ultimately goes into the policy statement, and those things are understood. From there, that statement, we have to identify the agenda, what is sought for, and the attitude from the policymakers, what they really intend to do, the values and the set of meaning that is involved in it. And while transmission to the implementers, usually loosey and the documents not available, others selectively interpret the policy for teachers, not enough time available to read the policy, and noise and interference with the policy signal, etc. So this middle part actually suggests that those who ultimately deal with this policy, they have little time to look into this policy. But well, the people who will implement those, they must have to understand the policy encoding process, and they must have to interpret the policy statement very properly so that it can very well be implemented in the field. And another important thing, I'd like to refer back to Mr. Rain, who way back in 1983 argues that there are actually three basic steps involved in the policy making. From these, looking into this interpretation process, the one is the problem setting and the mobilization of the fine structure of the government action. Another one is the achievement of the settlements. The compromises which established a framework for the policy, as in the given in the policy statement, in the face of the dilemmas, and the achievement of the settlements in the face of the dilemmas and the trades-off among the values. And the problem setting, to be very honest, to start with, is they just set a problem at first, defining something that needs to be done is usually the work of more than one agency. And sometimes the civil service is important in highlighting an issue. And sometimes a think tank such as an Institute of Economic Affairs, or sometimes the press, or the television, or sometimes even an individual such as Prime Minister, they can just propose for something, and usually it is or sometimes it is the combination of all those expert people's suggestions, or the press, or the television, or the head of the institution, or the head of the state. From them, the idea or the problem or issue is generated, or problem has been identified. And to deal with it, the mobilization of the fine structure of government action, that takes us, or depend on the nature of the policy being discussed. So how we will deal with it, That depends on how best we discuss on it and the context of policy making. And that involves definitely the government, school, local education authority, etc. If we take the consideration of our education sector, but if it is other sector, health sector, in that case, the government, hospital, the doctors, nurse, and the local health authority, they will be involved in structuring the mobilization of the fine structure of the government action, how it will be, identified, those actions. As we discussed, that this is a very critical issue, the action or the activities to be identified to solve that problem. And finally, the achievement or settlement of the in the face of the dilemma or trades-off among the values is another critical area. Policies are always the product of compromises between multiple agencies, as we have already discussed, agendas or the influences, because many people and many multiple agendas are involved in it. The actual outcome, the policy as articulated, will be the result of micro-political process or muddling through those processes. To be very honest, those different agendas and influences also play a very critical role. How best we will achieve the target that has been set within the policy purview. With this understanding, I think let's discuss about another critical area, the development of policy. I think from this discussion now, we can just visualize a picture of it. To develop the policy, you can see in the first diagram, we have used 4 broad areas. We need the analytical thinking, we need innovative thinking, we need strategic thinking, we need flexible thinking. The first of all is the analytical thinking. To be very honest, we have to understand the problem first. The people who are going to develop a particular, sorry, apologies, policy on an area, or to identify a problem area that needs to be resolved. And then you have to identify some, the real kind of activity that needs to be done through that policy. And under that analytical part, we have to describe it. And this part is actually described in the literature as the discover part. And the next one is the innovative thinking, where we will create, we will consult among the members who are involved in the process, and it will be there will be a recommendation that will come up what needs to be developed. And in the strategic thinking part, we will definitely go in action for implementing the policy. And that involves actually implementation part, decide part, and communicate with the ground level people on whom the policy will have an impact. And finally, the flexible thinking part, that debriefs, that actually adjust, evaluate, and monitor how the policy is working in the field level, and which has been described by someone as a policy cycle event, where this sort of activities has been again divided under 4 areas. I mean, if we just take it, the analytical thinking part links with the development of policy part, then and it also cross-cutting issue with the innovative thinking part, and then the implementation of policy part. There you will find some of the activities which takes us how best we will implement it, and then maintaining it. I mean, some of the to monitor it, to evaluate it, or to implement it. That will be the maintaining policy. And again, it comes back to the strategic part. I mean, that involves the communication, debate, and change, all these involves are involved in it. And to be very honest, this if we discuss, since the policy is a process, is a crucial element in educational policy, it is essential to clarify the concepts of policy, and that's why we took. We have dedicated two specific lecture on understanding the nitty-gritty of policy and its characteristics and how it is working. It is essential also to clarify the concept of policy as well as the policy making before we discuss or we go deep into the analysis of educational policy. And we have seen also there are competing definitions of policy and which are numerous and varied. And that's why policy making, to be very honest, is the first step of any planning cycle. Even as you are going to be the experts in education, one of the critical role that you will play as an educational planner. And as an educational planner, in the planning cycle, this policy making is the first most important step that we need to understand and that we need to play with. And the planners must appreciate the dynamics of policy formulation before they can design the implementation and evaluation procedure effectively. So the first part is how to make the policy is important. So we will now shift on to that part, and then the later part it will be followed, that is the implementation, how it will be implemented and how it will be evaluated to to have a better outcome from that.
So can I interrupt you for 1 minute, 1 second?
Yeah. Most welcome.
Before moving on to the next slide, can we ask if you have any questions about the previous slides? Okay. Did you hear me? Is he stuck?
Yes.
Could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. I don't know.
Yeah. So I was just wondering if we could ask the students if they had questions about the slides. Take one, maybe 2 or 3 minutes, and then move with the next slides. Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine, to be very honest. But as I said, that when you are away, it's quite not understandable because I cannot even see their faces and their eyes. Because had I been there, I could easily ask that question. That opportunity is very much open. If you have any question, you can just jump in immediately, and
maybe we will take 2 or 3 questions and then move on.
I have 2 questions. In one section, you talked about compromises. I want to, can you please give us some examples of what kind of compromises are we talking about? And my number 2 question is, what is the micropolitical late or missing in the class?
Sorry, could not understand your, could not hear you properly.
So you talked about compromises in one of the sections. So I was wondering what kind of compromises are we talking about? If you could please give us an example.
Which slide, which part are you?
You mentioned like policy means compromise, like the encoding and decoding.
Encoding and decoding. So in this part, you talked a bit about compromises, like
Negotiation, compromise, and
yes,
exercise of power.
yeah, process of encoding is a complex one in which policy texts are developed as a process of negotiation, compromise, and exercise of power. So they wanted like an example of what do you mean by compromising? What kind of compromises happen?
Okay. Now I got it. Thank you.
And also, what is
Maybe what's
Yeah.
a macropolitical process?
The other question is, what is micro policy process?
Political.
Micro political process.
Okay. The micro political process that actually refers to the, uh, the ground level people, those who are involved in it. I mean, on whom the policy will have a impact. I mean, their views, their understanding of it, their need, actually involvement of them. Through that, actually, we refer to the micro political process. That's related when we talk about the government is designing a policy. To be very honest, that's related to that micro political process. And as about the compromise and negotiation, I mean, that's again, the word has been used just to make a clear, and as we have referred to the policy as a matter of clear, understandable thing, which is well understood. What is said from the central level can be well understood at the ground level, so that that language can be negotiated, that compromise can be negotiated from the ground level experience that will be taken into consideration, so that everyone remains on the same page. And that's why actually this sort of a negotiation and compromise takes place while designing the policy, or while developing the policy. That's the a basic idea, to be very honest. Any other area that we need to discuss?
So you talked about decoding, policy decoding. So I want to know what type of decoding, like how do we decode a policy process, or why, like what type, how to do that?
So basically, what is policy decoding and what
Well,
is basically how is it done?
policy decoding, to understand it. That's why I have used that slide. Policy as received. The policy, when it will go to the policy implementers, and the policy is made from the central level at the ministry, but it is implemented at the school level. There are in between the education managers and all these people. So how do they understand at the school level that what needs to be done and how it will be done? That is actually policy decoding. When the policy is made from the central level, and whether the ground level people who will implement it, whether they understand the same thing, is about the policy decoding. And that's why we say that the policy implementers interpret the policy and makes decision about how to put it into practice. The policy is a rhetoric, but how to make it into practice in the classroom level is especially refers to that policy decoding thing. It's in a very simple, first encoding and then decoding.
Okay, we'll take one more question.
So my question is a little broad in the sense that when the government makes certain policies, whether it's about education or it's about a business or enterprise, sometimes the policies do not exactly reach the mass population. Like we are not aware what policies are there for us to follow or utilize. So this is the part of decoding. So is there any function the government has that to ensure that the mass understands the policy you have made?
Thank you very much. I think this discussion was very needed. This is such a nice question, which will actually help us to understand why I'm taking this sort of all these examples, that why policies needed to be understood. Because even if it is a very good policy made by the policy makers, they think that it is a very good policy. It will never be a good policy until and unless it is better implemented. And there is all the challenges to ensure that a policy is better implemented until and unless it is better understood by the, as we were describing in the earlier question, if it is not decoded or well understood from the ground level. So this particular match, this particular bridging is very important. And in many of the cases, you will see there are so many policies which you will see that people are in a chaotic situation. They are just criticizing it because it is not well explained, well decoded, well understood at the ground level. So one of the critical area, as we go on discussing it for other areas of policy, we will discuss that policy needs to be explained very well. It has to be popularized. It has to be owned by the people on whom it will be implemented. That is a critical area. That is why we are, as a education expert, we have to work on whenever the policy is taken, so that we do not think that it is a top-down approach. The policy is taken and you have to implement it. The critical role that have to be played is in the middle level. We have to unpack the meaning of policy. We have to make it popularized to the people who will be impacted through that policy. Those are the critical issues which are needed. Is that clear to you?
Okay, I think that's clear. I think we can move on with the lecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Maybe we have just finished. And this is another slide. To be very honest, I'm writing first because I have got some more theories just to give you a guideline so that you can have more reading on it and better understanding. Just I am going to give some of those references. When we if you look at these two graphs, you can see the first one is referring to a policy cycle by the Bridgman and Davis, the British writers. And they have seen it, as we have discussed, that at the very earlier age, problem definition, setting the agenda, formulation of policy, implementation, policy termination, and restatement of policy. But these again has been seen in another European Training Foundation. That's again another platform that works on the various issues like these. And their understanding, and they just saw it under 6 areas. That is, number 1, agenda setting. Number 2, policy formulation. Number 3, policy formation part. And number 4, policy implementation. Number 5, policy monitoring. And number 6, policy evaluation. And this figure, to be very honest, more is inspirational and influential approaches of policy cycle, as I have said, from the European Training Foundation. If you can just see the action number 1, which refers to, agenda setting. Action number 2, from agenda setting, which refers to identifying as we have discussed in the previous slide, the problem setting or problem identification. So from that, if we take the policy formulation, identifying that problem, we will go on for policy formulation. And number 6, that is policy evaluation. These 3 part actually refers to policy analysis, because when you are identifying the problem, when you are formulating the policy, this involves you in policy analysis. And again, if we look at area number 3, that is policy formation, area number 4, policy implementation, and area number 5, policy monitoring, that will actually takes us back to policy making through intervention. How we are going to play around with that policy in the field level. So these are simply some of the theories. That's how the researchers have looked into the policies issues. Even the theoretical perspective of the policy cycle provides us, to be very honest, a comprehensive framework for understanding how policies are formulated and implemented and evaluated. And that's why one of the key area that we plan to discuss in today's lecture is about the theoretical perspective of policy cycle. And this theoretical perspective of policy cycle, to be very honest, if we can see that policy cycle can be defined as a framework that considers the emergence of problem, as we have discussed in earlier also, the formulation of proposal for dealing with those problems, and endorsement of endorsement or introduction of those in the government stated policy, which we can see. I would like to refer back to Mr. Thomas R. Dye in his, when he was describing about 3 elements of policy system. He has used this triangular form that the policy stakeholders have got an impact on the public policy, because when they are identifying the thing, those public policies have gotten important influence on the policy environment, and it again goes back to policy stakeholders. And the emergence of the problem from the formulation of the proposal for dealing with those problems, and the endorsement of introduction of those governments, which we can actually see from that diagram. Again, this policy cycle are also known as a policy process, and is typically divided into distinct stages through a systematic approach to policies development. In the second figure, if we can just see, that explains the causes and consequences of policy. But today, I do not like to take you into the deep detail of that particular area. This is a slide I have just shared so that you can go to that particular book as a reference. We will have a deeper discussion when we will discuss on policy analysis in a later part, and policy making process, policy evaluation process. So we will discuss that part. But just to understand it, why we have given it, we can see that the influence of society, political system, and the public policy, all these are the area. This diagram, actually, you can see that societal condition, political systems characteristics, and the public policies, all these are linkages. All these has got a interconnected influence on each other when we are designing. If we look at the policy cycle as a process, again, we can see that the policy cycle is also known as a policy process, as I have discussed in earlier slide. And it is divided into distinct stages, typically, in the policy development phases. It was first, if I'm not wrong, that Laswell, he has described the stages of policy cycle, where he has identified the agenda setting, policy formulation, and decision making are the critical areas, and the policy implementation evaluation. Here they have given another area as a policy termination, because when you will evaluate, maybe you will have to take a decision that maybe this policy is not working, and that's why you have to terminate that, and you have to again go back to the agenda setting. In the Australian policy cycle, Australian writers like Bridgman and Davis, they have also identified another cycle of policy process. And you can see that policy process is never seen as a linear process. It's a circular kind of, it comes back to where from it has started, so that the new work can be done. As we can see that if it starts with identifying the issues, then policy analysis, as we have discussed, policy, identifying the policy instrument, and identifying and discussing or consultation with the people who are involved in it, coordinating the thing with the different stakeholders, taking some decisions. And based on that decisions, as we have also said, that policy is about decision making. So it takes us back to take decision making phase. After that decision making, we go on to the implementation. And when we implement it, we can again look back to evaluate it, whether it is working as it has been planned, and whether it needs to be division. So these two, theoretical base will give us the foundation for understanding, because Brisbane and Davis also suggest that policy cycle can be used to understand and structure policy development and bringing a system and a rhythm to the world that might otherwise appear chaotic or unordered. We have discussed it even in our first class, where if we do not actually structure our activities in an organization or in a government through some policy, there will not be a disciplined activity which will be implemented. We will see that disorder and unordered or chaotic situation. And these stages often include actually agenda setting, as we have seen in Laswell's framework, policy formulation, decision making, policy evaluation. And each stage is, you see, interrelated. And these are cyclical, suggesting that it is a continuous process. We have to come back to the process again to revisit it, and or to take some new policies or to terminate some policies. And by understanding this theoretical framework, to be very honest, policymakers and the stakeholders can better negotiate the intricacies of policy development and implementation. That's how, again, as your question came, that who negotiates? To be very honest, when even the policymakers and the stakeholders, as we have seen that in the policy cycle process, consultation is a critical area to be keep in mind. So all these are taken just to understand how we go about addressing policy. When we have said those, even in a recent time also, other theory based on practices also show the stages of policy as agenda setting, formulation, decision making, policy implementation, and policy evaluation. We have already said that this is typically characterized by several key steps and stages that guide the policy making process. And each of these stages is crucial in ensuring that policies are well designed and effectively implemented. For example, if we go for agenda setting, in agenda setting, we have to identify the issues that require governmental attention, or and again, we have to prioritize the issues on the policy agenda. In the next part, for policy formulation, we have to develop and analyze actually potential solutions for that particular problem, or that for addressing that issue. It also involves under policy formulation, considering various alternatives. In the decision-making part also, again, another important area, though we have discussed selecting the most appropriate course of action. That will be decided by the stakeholders as well as by the policymakers through consultation, and finalizing the policy decisions, what needs to be done. In the policy implementation phase, again, we have to put the chosen policy into practice, and we need to develop the programs based on which we implement certain policies. Maybe in next class when we will discuss our policy making, or see some example how those are implemented. Those examples will ultimately help us to understand these very particular concepts, how the policy is implemented, developing the programs, regulations, and initiatives. And finally, the policy evaluation, that is about assessing the effectiveness and the impact of policy, providing feedback for potential revision or new policies. I have already discussed with you that the evaluation is plays a very crucial role here. And steps and stages, to be very honest, it has been described by the theorists or educationists, or by the policy thinkers in many different ways. Sometimes even the evaluation, if you can just see here in this slide, that agenda setting takes us back to policy formulation, and then policy formulation takes us to policy adoption. We discussed about that policy adoption on that in our first lecture, that policy makers formally adopt a policy solution, usually in the form of legislation or rules. And that policy is taken, that ultimately is the area of decision making we have discussed. So you can find different language, different words, different steps used by different theories. But ultimately, these are the arena we are passing through. And from policy adoption, we go on for implementation. The government agencies begin to job of making the policy work by establishing procedure. And then we go on for policy evaluation. We have already discussed that they may recommend when we will recommend, implement policy. We can see that inside and outside the government or within the organization, there are some problems during implementation phase. So which may require revision or which may require dropping of some policy or taking some new policy, taking into consideration again the agenda set or the problem identified. So the whole thing, again, we can see how it goes back. From the policy revision, we again go back to agenda setting. Again, we have to come back to the first one. And even we have to, when we are implementing it, we have to revise the thing. So these are the steps and the stages that has been shared in the literature to understand our policy. And I'm sure these two, from these two classes, when we enter into the main lecture on policy, policy making, especially in relation to education, these will help us to understand how these policies plays a critical role. To be very honest, this class was basically meant for understanding the concept of policy, very initial part, understanding that part. And that's what, if we can summarize through that policy, actually, it is a tool, what governments want to do, why they do it, and what differences it makes to the people for whom the policy is made. So it is this interplay between these questions. Actually, we need to understand the policy. With these words, I would like to stop here for today's lecture. Maybe we can start discussion. Yeah.
There is a question for you if you have some time.
Yes, please.
So you showed a few of the flowcharts of policy process. Can you identify which one exactly does the government of Bangladesh follow?
Okay. I do not like to, because it is a long policy. I will discuss it tomorrow. It is already planned because we have got a course outline. I will discuss it in detail, how the government of Bangladesh follows policy making process and how it is implemented. That's a long process. But to be very honest, these are the general guidelines. Whichever country is implementing any policy, these are the basic thing that comes under play. You have to identify a problem or set an agenda to be implemented, number one. And government of Bangladesh also, like any other country, identifies that and then go on discussing on it or take decision. What needs to be done for that policy to be implemented? And then go on for the implementation. Yes, in between, though it shows that it is within the boundary of these 5 stages, but there are many things that plays in between, many factors that work in between. But definitely, this is the basic framework that is followed all over the world.
I'm not sure do we have time to take more questions or maybe next day?
It would be good to go to the have questions next day because I have got another meeting at 3. But till then, if it is very relevant to today's discussion, I think it would be really good to discuss today.
Always I have like question through these slides, how, though they have explained many things, but in my mind, the whole lectures, how, I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
The first class. And this is, you're supposed to be introduced to the concepts, not know how in the first class.
My
you
my
go-
dear students, we are just trying to feel the policies, different critical words and its jargons. Maybe we will, as we go deep into it, we will try to find out. Even your professor is not very clear, even today, after 30 years of dealing with policy, how it is working and why sometimes it is for failing. We have got the theory base, but when we practice it, there are so many issues. You will find that everyone will have something new to improvise to make it better and better. And that's how it's going on. So it's really good that you have got all those how questions. Let's stay with our how question alive so that in our next discussions and when we will deal with the examples from different policies and when we will enter into the analysis of policies, let's have a better debate on that. But I'm really excited to see that our students are so enthusiastic and to getting into the policy or jumping into the policy so quickly. Yes, anything else?
I think we'll move on to the discussion section.
Thank you.
And the next day we'll get back to questions.
That's very good. But yesterday I had a mind that it would have been nice if I could be with you while you were discussing the thing. Unfortunately, I told you, apart from being a academic, I have got another hat on. That is a clerical job. So I have got a meeting with the Honorable Minister now, but in my mobile, it will be on. If I can just hear, that will really enrich me because every single day while working practically in the field, I'm learning that because whatever we are doing, we are dealing practically with this policy, how to implement that policy, what sort of challenges we are facing with the policy, how the public is reacting to it, how the teachers are reacting to it, how the parents are reacting to it. So many things plays in around. So it will be really nice to have deep discussion whenever we analyze those in our next class. But unfortunately, for today, maybe it will not be very possible to jump in when you are discussing. But I will try to be connected, if possible, to listen whatever is discussed. Thank you.
Okay, first, a few housekeeping rules. Also, like one thing is that I understand a lot of questions you might have, and he's just here for 1 hour every day. So for every class, I'll open a Google in a Google Classroom. I'll open a section where you can drop in questions.
That's okay.
Okay, so that either we can answer them over Google Classroom or next class I could remind him that, okay, these are the questions and you can take them. Okay,
You're still being recorded?
it's not my, it's not from my side. I think that's fine. It's,
Sir, ma'am, I understand that this is just 1 hour lecture, yeah? But is it not better that every like definition support with a unique example?
Yeah.
You have a lot of experience in this field, like Professor Glenn that support every sentences, even if they.
so I understand your it's concern, question, request, but every professor has a very different way of teaching.
Yeah, that's.
Having said that, this is the first class and you're just knowing the jargon now. Like, I'm not sure how many of you are aware of all the policy jargon. So we're just getting aware of the policy jargon so that once you go through the different stages, we start with formulation and then implement. development and like all these different stages of policy cycle, you're better aware of those terms. And for this course, I think we'll use Bangladesh as an example a lot. It's going to be the case study, so you'll hear a lot about Bangladeshi policies, and I think after this, you're gonna be experts on that. So, yeah, maybe from next time, we'll get a bit more. I can't promise that because I'm not making this lecture, but I'll definitely ask him to provide more examples.
That would even be better, like if the slide would be zooming.
Yeah.
All the slides in the Google Classroom. It was hard to see.
Okay, I'll ask him.
No, I cannot.
So I'll ask him, it's just, he's not the one who's handling all this,
Yeah.
so it's a three-way communication that's happening, but I'll let him know.
Since the slides are available in the Google Classroom, you can open it in your phone.
It's all in the
Yeah.
classroom. The reason is I requested the slides earlier so that once the lecture is going on, you have them.
We can access.
You can access them, okay? But I have asked him, I'll also ask him to try, because it's a three-way communication that we are having, so. Have your hands raised?
Miss, I wanted to ask if the examples he'll give regarding Bangladesh's policy, would it be focusing on education or any other field?
Education.
Education.
It should be education.
The education policy.
Like, we will be crazy, we go beyond that.
We'll only learn about Bangladeshi.
No, we'll try to
Here,
get
there's a lot of example.
this, because we'll focus, Bangladesh as a case study. We'll try to have an idea about policy in general, but Bangladesh should be the case study to help you understand better. And of course, we'll try to, particularly in the discussion sessions and the readings that I'll provide you, we'll try to incorporate more examples from other countries as well.
I also wanted to know that the
Next class, please. Next, one announcement about next class. So next class on Sunday, you'll just have the lecture. You'll not have the discussion. I'll not be here. So, Mr. Saiba, she'll be taking a class, but she'll be here for the session, and I'll reschedule the discussion session.
and also know request, since this topic is kind of very broad and very complicated for me, can we suggest some books or articles
There
for
will
me
be
to
articles. I'll share.
before reading so that I can understand more things in the class?
From next, not for the lectures, but for discussion sessions, you'll have articles. So I will from next, because this.
Yeah, ma'am, when I open the slide after the classes, I see some words that's hard to understand. It's a simple word, but it's also feel like they have bigger meaning.
What is it?
Wait a second, and I don't understand that.
That's why we had this introductory course. That's the thing, that's what I'm trying to say, that's why we had this introductory class, so that you're at least aware of the jargons. And from next class here, we'll have readings. So definitely have readings.
Here's some notes where they get practice in this.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Maybe that one also help.
Okay, yeah. I'll ask.
Yeah, all the bigger meanings.
Okay, can we come back as a class, please? So housekeeping rule. This is a.
Very interested.
See, this is a small classroom. So when you speak, I don't like micromanaging classes, but when you speak among yourselves, it sort of interrupts because we have a small classroom and it interrupts the flow. So for at least that 1 hour that we are here inside the classroom, 2 hours, I request you focus on the lectures and not discussing among yourselves. We are here to answer your questions, and after the class, you definitely feel free to talk to each other about everything. But when we're inside the class, I just request that you focus more on the lecture and not speaking to each other. Okay?
Anna, do we have now some questions for a discussion? So can you share them before the class with us? Just we can just read.
No, this is that, the questions will come in the class, and then that's when you do the discussion. You'll discuss and we'll have the questions
Yeah, that's perfect.
only when we are in the class. You had your hands raised?
Yeah, I was was about to say, last session was more clear, this one didn't relate to.
This one is a lots of theoretical materials. I understand. I'll ask for the notes. And maybe if you have more detailed questions about particular, for example, the time or micro political process or any, feel free to write all the questions in that particular, I'll open a separate section.
Just comment on questions where you post the slide.
One of them.
And so this conversation.
Sure, yeah, go, I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, that's.
It's better like, let's talk.
So I'll send you the questions and we'll be responding to those questions. Okay, we'll start with the discussion sessions. One thing I wanted to start with is the topic that you brought up a bit about why not multiple. I understand what's multiple. We know it's more on like a ground level or a small level. But the fact that when you initiate a policy or when you formulate a policy, there is negotiation, compromise, and a lot of political power play. Professor did talk a bit about it, but it's also because a lot of different actors in a policy setting has different interests. And maybe the interests of the ground level people might not align with the ones that are the higher level, right? So when you're making a policy, most of the time we assuming that it's a very ideal world, we try to come to a compromise where every single actors are getting some benefits out of it. And think about what, because everything has a trade-off. You understand what's trade-off? Yeah, everything has a trade-off. So you think about what right now is the priority. And many times you feel like, well, in economics, we always think about like, when we think, let's think about division of wealth or think about how you're gonna utilize your resources. Very simple example. If you're utilizing more resources today, you have less resources for the future generations, right? So that's our trade-off. Like who do you prioritize more? Your current citizens of the country, or do you think about the future? You think about the development and you think about what the country would be like 50 years from now. So everything has a trade-off. Everyone has different interests. So when you're making a policy, you think about like all these different interests, all these different actors and their relationships, and then you come up with this compromise. You try to negotiate. Every actor would try to negotiate, and also there is a power play. In a not very ideal world, there's definitely power play. So I just wanted to add this to your question.
Because the next phrase that follows the compromise, I didn't even notice it for exercise of power. But yesterday when we were discussing the definition of policy, it's a policy for voluntary compliance. So if it's voluntary compliance, but then there is a certain, to whichever degree power is involved or exercise of power is involved, how does it really remain voluntary compliance?
So our policies, I mean, if you remember the difference we talked about policies and laws. So policies it's not always a voluntary compliance, because many times for you to enforce the policy, you have laws and legislation. So in that case, what you say that there might be an exercise of power so that things are in a certain field.
And also wanted to know how does part of the policy making process or policy implementation process, how do they decide which policies are good for the general market or not?
That's a very broad question. That's a very broad question, and maybe once we start going through different stages, you'll know a bit more about that. But here is the thing: when you're implementing a policy, you have research, you have your previous knowledge, you have a lot of analysis, and you do all these different stages. But until and unless it's implemented, you don't know whether how will it be received or what would be the outcome. There could be different outcome. I mean, even if the policy is in your best interests, finally, did you talk about the decoding? And yeah, we'll do a bit of discussion on decoding and encoding. If you don't understand why this policy is being implemented, you might not even react to the way the logic wants. So until and unless it's implemented, it's not very easy to understand the effect of it. I mean, that's why evaluation always comes at the end. Okay, so I have some discussion questions. Again, we'll work in a group of, how many students are we here today?
For this course, we go for analyzing policies which are.
Not in depth.
For international, international policies regarding education, which is sometimes implemented like UNICEF.
No, we'll not be looking at, it's not an analysis course, it's not it's more like an introduction to policy course. So you just get to know more about what are the different regions of policy making and policy setting.
We have 23, 24. Did you count your?
So groups of 5, maybe.
Seven? Four?
3, I guess.
Harajan, you're confident? You're confident?
24.
Yes. 34,
23.
Oh, you were talking back.
Yeah, there was a flag over there. Something 1%.
Okay, so 5 questions and you'll get 20 minutes. We'll get 20 minutes to work on the groups, discuss among yourself. Feel free to use internet. I think some of you will need more internet than others. So, but after that, we'll come as a group, as a class and discuss. So, 5 people in each group, group 1. Okay, group 1. You will talk about, so you would be discussing. 2. So, can I have some silence in the class, please?
Yes.
Sorry. So you would be talking about the first question, which is why do you think policies that are encoded and the ones that are decoded are different to each, like are different sometimes, and come up with an example. And 2, you would be talking about a bit, it would be like a follow-up of what
Yes.
one will be discussing, and something that you have asked, that how do policies ensure that throughout the policy cycle, there is a smooth transition. So something that you have asked, so you'll be answering your own question.
Great.
Group 3.
So let's look at the policy cycle.
See, so we have talked about context, content, process, and actors, right? So what I want you to do is a bit of a come up with.
I want to use the simplest one.
What are the contexts, actors?
Okay, the first one.
See short, and then we'll come together.
4 stages.
Okay, questions?
We will make the policy.
5 stages.
We will come up with a.
You will research for it.
What is it?
Group 4.
Process of changing.
We move slowly.
Yes.
Okay, so
Policy.
agenda setting, a lot of information from the,
Example, in a democracy.
unless you know the what's suffering.
Then you
But clearly, I have interest. understand what the bird. For example, the cyclone. If you see the question, and there were about 500,000 homes that were destroyed by the cyclone. So if the government wants to group five policy, reconstructing the home. Like to first understand what kind of home
Think of a policy and what are the definition of culture, economic, and
that they have to
social factors that have impacted the particular ground. Any contact
the state.
anywhere of the world and think about this.
For this,
20 minutes and then we're coming back as a class.
somebody my idea. They conduct audits and then identify the problem. Then they do research.
Which is Second question.
Agenda setting.
Stages of. Yes. Setting the agenda.
Agenda setting, then how do you go to information? Actually, do you think that ground level people should still be? Or should the and then the experts come?
By this policy, rules was implemented.
For example, in agenda setting, talk to the ground level people, the needs and interests are what they do. And then for policy formation, do you keep them? And information and then keep the experts.
Do you think it's necessary that all the people, like she said, the ground level, they all destroy these policies? Checking in farmers, it never happened.
It never happened.
Probably that's why policy. It is the people included, maintenance,
Ground level people. People who.
nowadays, no, but in every state, right, not just for helping to fight implementation. People of America did, yeah.
They're fighting for. But nobody's listening.
This is
Should they be included?
Yeah.
I think they should.
In every state.
Because the policies are made for the.
For them.
Policy, public policy.
I think it will be make easier than because we can't imagine. And when the people they are in.
So the small transition can be, like us, are in. But we are in.
We have to find, I think it's not good enough. Because if it's not South Korea. South Korea. That's parliament. With parliament, no, not South. There were the representatives representing one of the biggest problems. But all of them were in. Whoever is representing.
How do you choose? Yeah, actually. Everywhere there is a.
That's their own problem. So what about the policy option to be transparent?
The government. It shouldn't be a main.
So what they say, they should have this
Evidence.
Yeah.
So how are you shift? How do you make it?
Policy negotiations of, look at this policy option strategy in the border.
In the middle.
Let us find a specific context.
Policy negotiations.
Policy. So I already searched context.
Okay.
I think that's how we can make it good is documenting everything.
Process and
Okay, we just do.
You document the information you receive, you document the ideas, you document every single option and strategy. And then when you sit together with it, all the information you need.
People say exciting about experts, find out what they come to the share it with the people.
Yes.
where the actors.
And also the formulations of now the labor people, their representative, if they were present here, so they can make they can representing people and the experts.
I don't know, he didn't explain it.
The cyber assault, like not that deep, it has a very good compound that
When I didn't understand, like
years ago.
So you were saying.
and it's a very.
So come to the effects it and yeah, what is what about the Scotland policy implementation?
You what are the policies or
Yeah, I'm just worried, are we actually answering the question? Ensure a smooth transition between the stages. From formulation to implementation. The ground level people. So they will help make the implementation possible. Because we are involving the ground level people, the person will go, then like up to everybody, why the policy. They will implement it. But we'll say.
And policy implementation, finished, come to the policy implementation. Enforcement, policy improvement, monitoring, installation of. First of all, you have to. And I don't think so for monitoring or enforcement.
Yeah, because otherwise.
They are already included, they are already know about that. For implementation, they are also. Is there any enforcement?
There is not the enforcement. Do you know?
So this is what we know that. It is even different, but they are active with it.
Smarter than ChatGPT.
We are studied very according to our understanding.
Can I see something?
We have something.
Yeah? Not much? I use it for my brainstorming to give ideas.
See what other size are the lifestyle. We have it experience.
We all are training.
I said that. We can start working on this.
Learning language, that's amazing.
Last time I asked them,
Context is why this
became so close.
Again, using ground level people,
the circumstance order.
language
Because the product sharing on sharing in the framework, everything according to their experience. And to the policy makers.
How's the word? You're doing something?
It is so. But then now they are for the around. Are you hoping to win? She likes it. It's not, now it's been. The seasonal spirit. Even Serbia thinks that house. The policy one is one slavery union.
Fine, it is one.
Like
He sees that there are so many
Name is courage.
now we have energy saving. Relationship between God makes an also based on your criteria. They were.
I see.
It's like maybe
Pilot testing. We didn't see pilot testing.
But you. I see. I only have sometimes that. Yeah, I think the policy is still going.
It's something post-pandemic. What happened?
And one.
Education is, then ICT division was also involved. Yes, ICT division. This IT people, the branch of technology. Yeah, technology. Even the ex-men, you're also
social activist. Online fitness work. Mobile laptops and during online classes while I was
I don't know. First ever.
Either in India or somewhere one of the a lot of and now performance does not
Just to learn from her. She wants to keep it inside.
now Ronak is more it's not like here, it's like the
No, sis.
very good. That's the policy.
is anti development because and that's not the solution. I am not implemented. That's what I but it's not the big so is the report such as they are not reading and then why has this not I think it's not improved in that. So now
and then after it has been implemented, some in the evaluation say, it's very I'm just saying, that's Yesterday, sometimes
the dimensions see the policy. Yeah. What is plan?
And the related also information from the stream for updating them and glorifying them.
that is another thing that is related to education in the communication. Most of it, this is supposed to be transparent. Okay, implementation is not like that entirely alter the history. They are supposed to, if the opposition party, like, let's just say a party that is currently is not really currently on interest, but in the past they did something good. So they are supposed to. No, wait. In democracy, they're supposed to add. No, but in autocracy, it's like the entire nation is one. So even in the speech, even in education, like they add always central. Like they're with the ruling politician, their political party or their agenda. Education policy. Because it used to be, it's like they are.
7 more minutes, we'll come back as 3:14.
Yeah.
The policy.
No, I just noted them down how they're different. It is another way in those debates and in legislative process different, executive different, legislative body different. And what and also democracy involves transparency. So even if there is something wrong in this, politically it's not. It will be home. In Bachelor's democracy does national.
Well, there is a political